So the Democrats brand themselves as tolerant and stuff, and they call Republicans MAGA mainly, and really anyone who disagrees with them and racists. And everyone knows that isn't true, but it's all a projection from these libtards. So I'm gonna name out times Democrats haven't been very tolerant, and I'm gonna name one for every major race, religion, all those categories. And I'm gonna be specifically talking about left-wing Democrats, people who have more liberal policies, because a lot of segregationist Democrats from back in the day were more conservative Democrats. And for some of them, that's objectively true. They did have sort of more socially conservative views, but ones that have fiscally liberal views are included. And before we begin, Democrats hate conservatives, so that's already a political group they hate. Now we begin. So starting with racial discrimination, we have left-wing discrimination against blacks. So there's a lot to name here, but there's Theodore G. Bilbo, who was a U.S. Senator from Mississippi, if he counts. Technically, he was more socially conservative, but he was fiscally liberal. There's Joe Biden, too. He was a segregationist who had moderately liberal views during his 300 years as a U.S. Senator in Delaware. Virginia Governor Ralph Northam was caught doing blackface while posing next to someone dressed up as a Klansman, and he literally admitted to it, so that's how we know. And for an added bonus, there's James Talarico, who allegedly called Democratic primary opponent Colin Allred a mediocre black man. Sounds kind of racist, to be honest. I mean, Colin Allred does seem pretty mediocre. I don't know a single notable thing he's done, but classifying him by race proves that the Democrats do see color. And Donald Trump is racist because he posted a fucking meme on Truth Social. But the next racial category is the crackers. Oh, sorry, whites. That's what social justice warrior Al Sharpton, who was a perennial candidate for these offices on the screen, called white people numerous times. Jesse Jackson, who was the U.S. Shadow Senator from D.C., had also used frequent slurs against Jews and whites. As a cherry on top, for a more modern story, Minnesota U.S. Representative Ilhan Omar said that we should be more fearful of white men, even though she's married to one.
I would say our country should be more fearful of white men across our country, because they are actually causing most of the deaths within this country.
Editing creepy, she also racially profiled white men, so that's also racist. Kind of a double standard. When we say we don't want Somalians in our country, we get blasted by these insufferable leftards. But when a minority says the same about whites, they go off scot-free. Left-wing media is so anti-white, it's insane. Like, I never understand when blacks discriminate against white people. We're the ones who brought you here, and white Republicans are the ones who freed you. But next, there's discrimination towards Asian Americans. So one example is Betty Cook Scott, who was a Michigan state representative who tried running for state senator in 2018, but lost the primary, likely due to racist remarks she made toward opponent and fellow state representative Stephanie Chang. So since she's Taiwanese American, Betty called her Ching Chong, Ching Chang, and said a bunch of hateful things toward her campaign volunteers as well. She also had criticized Stephanie's husband, who is black, for marrying an Asian woman. And she admitted to it, so that's enough proof for me, really. But you're saying that black people, who are from the most underdeveloped, poorest continent ever, are better than Asian people, who come from a continent that is tied with North America for being like the most technologically advanced. I'm all for having pride in your race and everything, but it gets to a level where it's honestly just delusion. But next, we have discrimination against Hispanic people. To be honest, there aren't many cases of liberals discriminating against Hispanic people, but there was one time when Kamala Harris was running for president in 2024 where at a campaign rally addressing immigration, I think she put on a slight Latina accent before switching back to her normal voice, which according to the Democrats is racist, I guess. There's also when President Lyndon B. Johnson apparently said slurs against Mexican Americans in private conversations. I don't know, for that one you kind of have to do some mental gymnastics to call it racist, but that's what the Democrats would think there. For against brown people, there aren't as many cases as I thought, but against Indians, there's, I guess, when now FBI Director Kash Patel was called a sand N-word. and given death threats during January 6th when his personal info was leaked and stuff. Now, it wasn't linked to leftists, but it was likely them. There was also a time when Joe Biden, also during his 300 years as a senator in 2006, he said, "You cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent." I guess that was apparently more of a joke, but still. There also haven't been any cases of liberal politicians explicitly discriminating against Arab people, probably because they want them to flood our country and enforce Sharia law or whatever. Even though that's more of a right-wing thing, state religion is like more socially conservative. But the second to last racial category is Native Americans, and Presidents FDR, Harry S. Truman, LBJ, Woodrow Wilson, Joe Biden supported some segregation of Native Americans. Vice President Hubert Humphrey supported some legislation against Native Americans during his time as a senator from Minnesota in the 50s, but he later changed his mind. Now, the final racial category, and technically a religious category, is Jews. The Democrats call Republicans Nazis, but they're the ones who are against Israel and hate Jews. As I said earlier, there are Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson who said some derogatory things towards Jews back then. There's also Maine U.S. Senate candidate Graham Gestapo Plattner, who had a tattoo one time, and he also has Israel derangement syndrome. There's also John E. Rankin, who was a U.S. representative from Mississippi. He was one of the most openly racist Democrats, who was also anti-Semitic. He accused Jews of being non-patriotic Americans, of being communists, of loving black people, and he frequently used slurs against the Jews. Oh, and he was also anti-black and anti-Asian, so he fits into those previous categories. Probably should have mentioned him there. Now, technically he was more socially conservative, but he was center-left fiscally and supported the New Deal, so I think he counts kind of. There's also Theodore G. Bilbo, whom I mentioned earlier as being anti-black, but he was also very anti-Semitic. And there's also, like, so much more. That's not even the tip of the iceberg. Or, well, kind is, because there aren't that many categories here. But there's also the ones that discriminate against religion. So for anti-Christian Democrats, a good example is Graham Plattner, who is an atheist who has called Jesus a zombie and the Virgin Mary a skank. And to be honest, I can't really find any other examples of directly anti-Christian or anti-religious Democratic politicians. I mean, obviously there are lots of anti-religious Democrats on like X and stuff, but we're talking about politicians here. And I guess a lot of Democrats try and use religion so they can get elected. A lot of them identify as like Christian for that purpose, you know, like demographic voting. But that's really about it. It's mainly Democrat politicians who discriminate against race and sort of religion. There aren't really any that discriminate against, say, sexuality. Surprisingly, there aren't really any notable anti-straight Democrat politicians. Once again, there are lots of people on social media who think heterosexuality is bad. Someone even said on X that heterosexuality shouldn't be pushed on kids, which is crazy because people are built to be straight. And there obviously aren't any who are against LGBTQ plus sexualities. So I guess the race Democrats hate the most are Jews, at least nowadays, since most Democrats have IDS. And back then, it would have been blacks that they hate the most, I think. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, make sure to like, comment what I should do next, maybe turn on post notifications, share, make sure to follow me on X, Gab, and Rumble, and yeah, see ya.